Long, long ago, in a small Igbo village, nestled between two slow brown rivers, there lived two sisters who shared a single roof but carried two very different hearts. The elder was called Adaeze, the younger was called Chioma. This is the story of one evening when these two sisters walked together to a well at the edge of the village. Only one of them came home blessed. The other came home cursed beyond anything Umuogu had ever seen. And by morning, every elder in that village would understand what kind of stranger they had been turning away from their doors. This is a folk tale from the soil of eastern Nigeria, the kind your grandmother told you under the moonlight,
moon watched over
before the
them,
world had so many lights.
and they listened.
Adaeze was 16 years old. Her name meant daughter of the king, but she walked the village paths with the humility of a servant. She rose before the cock crowed to sweep the compound. She fetched the firewood her old grandmother could not lift. Every evening, when the family sat down to eat, she gave the largest piece of yam to her younger sister and took the smallest for herself. She had hands rough from work and palms soft from prayers. Shema was 14 years old. Her name meant good God, but her tongue had long forgotten the meaning. She was beautiful. Everyone in Umuogu said so, and she had had them say it so often that she had come to believe she deserved more than her share of everything. More yam, more clothes, more attention, more love. Her hands were soft as cocoa butter. She had never lifted a pistol. She had never knelt to grind pepper. She spent her afternoon by the river, but only to look at her own reflection in the river. Her mother had died when Chioma was very small. Their father, a quiet young farmer named Nnamdi, had done his best to raise them both alone. But a man's hands cannot do a mother's work, and so Adaeze had become Chioma's mother in everything but name, and Chioma had become her sister's burden. Sister, Adaeze would say, come and help me pound the yam. My hands will be ruined, Chioma would answer. And then who would marry me? Sister, Adaeze would say, come and help me sweep the compound. I'm not a servant, Chioma would answer. Father did not raise me to be a servant. And every time Adaeze would sigh and finish the work alone. Nnamdi saw it, and he said nothing. For he believed, as many parents do, that the gods would teach his daughter what he could not. He was right. It was a dry season. The rains had stopped for 3 long months. The village well in the center of Umuogu was running low, and so the women had begun to use the older well, the one at the edge of the village, deep in the bush, where the Iroko trees grew tall, and the spirits of the ancestors were said to linger after sunset. One evening, Nnamdi returned from the farm and called his daughters. The water pot is empty, he said. Go together to the old well, take 2 pots, come back before noon rises. Adaeze stood at once. Yes, Papa. Chioma did not stand. Why must I go? I went last week. You only went last month, Adaeze corrected softly. Feels like last week. Nnamdi rubbed his forehead. He had been on the farm since dawn. His back ached. He had no strength left to argue with a daughter who had inherited her grandmother's stubbornness and her mother's beauty. Go with your sister, Chioma. The path is long after dark. Chioma rose slowly, as if standing up were an offense to her dignity. She picked up the smaller pot, leaving the larger one for Adaeze, as she always did. The 2 sisters walked out into the orange light of the dying day. The path to the old well wound through cassava farms and past the small shrine of the village protector spirit. The sun had set behind the Iroko trees, leaving the sky the color of bruised mangoes. Crickets had begun their evening song. Somewhere far away, a hyena laughed, and Chioma shivered. I hate this path, she muttered. It is the same path Mama used to walk, Adaeze said. Mama is dead, sister. Yes, Adaeze said quietly, but the path is still here. They walked on in silence. The thin crescent moon began to rise behind them. The air grew cool. The shadows of the iroko trees stretched across the dead path like the fingers of sleeping giants. Sister, Chioma said suddenly, her voice sharp again. What will you do if I marry a rich man and you do not? Adaeze laughed. I will dance at your wedding. And if I have to dance at yours, then I will dance harder. So you have a reason to come. Chioma rolled her eyes, but for a moment, only a moment, she felt the warmth of her sister's love, and it surprised her. Then she pushed the feeling away, the way she pushed away everything that did not flatter her. They reached the old well as the last light drained from the sky. The well was ancient, older than the village itself, some said, built from black stones the founders had carried up from the rivers generations ago. Around it grew a single old baobab tree. Its branches stretched out like the arms of an old grandmother holding the well close. And beneath the baobab, sitting on the ground with her back against the trunk, was an old woman. She was so bent that her chin nearly touched her knees. Her clothes were tattered, the color of dust. Her hair was a thin gray cloud. Her hands, folded in her lap, were trembling. Though whether from cold or hunger or age, neither sister could tell. Chioma stopped walking. She made a small sound of disgust. There's a beggar at the well. Adaeze did not stop. She walked forward, and as she did, the old woman lifted her head. My children, the woman whispered. Her voice was thin, but it carried. I have been sitting here all day. The sun was cruel. Would one of you spare a sip of water for an old woman who cannot draw her own? Adaeze knelt down at once. She set her pot down without a word. She walked to the well, lowered the bucket, drew up fresh cold water, and filled the small calabash she carried at her waist. She returned and held the calabash to the old woman's lips. The old woman drank slowly, with her eyes closed, as if each sip was a memory. Thank you, child, she whispered. Thank you. Then Adaeze reached into the pocket of her wrapper. There was one yam in it, a small one, roasted that morning. She had been saving it for her own dinner. She placed it gently in the old woman's lap. It is small, Mama, she said, but it is warm. The old woman lifted her eyes, and for a moment, only a moment, Adaeze saw something in those eyes that was not old at all. They were the eyes of someone who had seen the founding of the world and was still waiting to see its end. The old woman smiled. Her teeth were broken, but her smile was beautiful. Go in peace, daughter, she said softly. And when you speak tomorrow, may every word you utter be a gift to the world. Adaeze did not understand the blessing. She bowed her head. She picked up her pot. She drew her water, and she walked away into the falling night. But Chioma had been watching. She had been watching and she had been calculating. She walked forward now, kicking up dust on purpose, so it landed near the old woman's feet. The old woman looked up. My child, she whispered. A sip of water? I'm so thirsty. Chioma laughed. It was a sharp, ugly laugh, the kind that hurts you more than a slap. Look at you, she said. Look at the state of you. Why do you not go and beg from your own people? Why are you sitting at our well, frightening honest children? Move away. I want to draw water, and I do not want to look at your face while I do it. The old woman did not flinch. Her face did not change. She only looked at Chioma, and Chioma, who was used to being looked at with admiration, suddenly felt very cold beneath that gaze. "My child," the old woman whispered, "are you sure that is your final word?" "My final word? My final word is that you stink," Chioma snapped. "Go and die somewhere else. The well is for clean people." The old woman closed her eyes. She said nothing for a long time. The wind moved through the baobab branches above her. Then she opened her eyes again. "Very well, my child," she said very softly. "Then when you speak tomorrow, may every word you utter be exactly what your heart deserves." Chioma snorted.
Old fool!
She drew her water, splashing some on purpose, so it nearly hit the old woman, and walked away. She did not look back. If she had looked back, she would have seen the bent old crone rise to her full height, and the crone was gone. And in her place stood something tall and beautiful and terrible, the eyes with 2 stars and skin like polished ebony. But Chioma did not look back. She never did. The sisters did not speak on their way home. Adaeze felt strangely peaceful, a warmth in her chest she could not explain, as if she had swallowed something sweet. Chioma only felt the heat of her own anger. She walked faster. She kept her chin lifted. She told herself the old woman was nothing. But somewhere deep inside her, a small voice whispered, "You should not have done that." Chioma silenced the voice by humming all the way home. Adaeze woke first the next morning, as always. She stretched, she yawned, and from her open mouth, a small piece of gold fell and rolled across the floor of her sleeping mat. She stared at it. Her heart began to pound. She picked it up. It was warm. It was real. It was heavy and bright and pure. She whispered, "What? What is this?" And from her lips, 3 more pieces of gold tumbled out. She clapped her hand to her mouth in shock. "Papa!" she called. "Papa!" And as she called him, a small shower of gold coins rained from her lips onto the floor. Nnamdi rushed in from the next room. He saw the gold. He saw her daughter's face, terrified, then laughing, then crying. He fell to his knees. "What spirit has visited my house?" he whispered. "What spirit?" "Papa," Adaeze said, and with each word, more gold fell. "Papa, an old woman at the well," she said. The gold piled up around her feet, enough to feed the family for a year, enough to send the village children to school, enough to build a new house. Adaeze covered her mouth with her hands, weeping with joy. "She blessed me, Papa. She blessed me. And I did not deserve it. I only gave her water." Nnamdi pulled his daughter to his chest. "You deserve it," she whispered. "You've always deserved it. Your mother told me. Before she died, she said, 'Watch our Adaeze. She has the heart of the ancestors.'" In the next room, Chioma was already awake. She had heard everything. Her chest was burning with jealousy. Her hands were clenched into fists. Gold? Gold from her sister's mouth? Adaeze, the plain one, the boring one. Adaeze, receiving such a gift? She sat up quickly. She would march to her father and demand that he find the old woman. She would demand that the old woman come and bless her too. She was the beautiful one. She was the deserving one. She opened her mouth to call him, "Pa!" A small cold body slid past her tongue, over her lower lip, and onto the floor. A snake. A black snake. No thicker than a finger, but very alive. Chioma screamed, or she tried to scream. But every sound that came from her mouth was a snake. A river of them. Black, brown, green. Some no bigger than worms. Others as long as her arm. They poured from her open mouth and slithered across the floor into the corners of the hut. She fell backward, choking, weeping. She could not stop them. Every sob, every cry, every gasp was another snake. Adaeze and Nnamdi ran in. The snakes did not bite. They only slid past, as if in a hurry to leave the cursed mouth of Chioma. but the floor was alive with them. Nnamdi grabbed the broom and began sweeping them out into the yard, where they vanished into the bush. Adaeze sat in the middle of the floor, her hands clamped over her mouth, weeping in silence, because every sound was another curse. "Chioma," Adaeze whispered, tears in her own eyes. "Sister, what did you do?" Chioma could not answer. She dared not open her mouth. But Adaeze understood the old woman, the blessing, the curse. By midday, the whole village knew. Word had spread that the elder sister could speak gold, and the younger sister could only speak snakes. The village elders came. Some came to take gold. Nnamdi gave to all who asked, with Adaeze's blessing. Some came to look at Chioma with pity. Others came to look at her with satisfaction. But Chioma had been cruel to many people in the village, and they were not surprised that the gods had finally answered her. The wisest of all the elders, Adaeze, sat with Chioma alone in the hut. Chioma sat with her hands clamped over her mouth, weeping in silence. "Granddaughter," Adaeze said, "you must go and find that old woman. You must beg her for forgiveness. There is no other way." Chioma's eyes were wide. How could she go? She could not even speak. Every word was a snake. "You could use signs," Adaeze said. "You could use your tears. You could use your knees. But you must go before the moon is full again, or this curse will follow you to your grave and into the grave." Chioma walked to the old well that very evening. The path felt longer now. The iroko trees seemed taller. The crickets seemed louder. She fell to her knees beneath the Baobab tree, where the old woman had sat the night before. There was nobody there. She wept. Snakes fell silently from her lips and disappeared into the grass. She stayed all night. Just before dawn, when the sky was the color of an old bruise turning slowly into silver, she heard footsteps. She looked up. The old woman stood before her, or rather, the tall and terrible spirit stood before her, eyes like stars, skin like polished ebony. Chioma fell flat on her face. She wept without words. Every snake that fell from her mouth was an apology she could not speak. The spirit looked down at her for a long time. "Child," she said at last, "your sister gave me water and a yam, and you gave me your mouth full of bitterness. Why should I help you?" Chioma could not answer. She could only weep. "Tell me what you would do," the spirit said. "Tell me with your hands." Chioma sat up slowly. She held out her hands. She mimed sweeping, for sweeping was her sister's work, the work she had always refused. She mimed pounding yam. She mimed carrying water. She mimed kneeling before old women, before beggars, before strangers, before every soul she had ever turned away. The spirit watched, said nothing. "And if I lift the curse," the spirit finally said, "and you forget, and you go back to your old ways?" Chioma shook her head. She pointed at her chest. She placed her hand on her head. She placed her hand on her heart, and then on her stomach, and then on her forehead. "I will not forget. I will not forget. I will not forget." The spirit knelt. She placed her long ebony fingers on Chioma's trembling lips. "Then speak, child." Chioma opened her mouth. No snake came out, only a single word: "Forgive." The spirit smiled, and she rose, and she was gone. Chioma walked home in the silver light of the dawn. She did not run. She did not laugh. She walked slowly, like a girl carrying something heavy. When she reached the compound, Adaeze was waiting. She had been waiting all night. The two sisters looked at each other. Chioma opened her mouth. "Sister," she said, "I am sorry." The word was a word. Just a word, no gold, no snake, only a word. Adaeze ran to her, and the sisters held each other, and they wept for the first time since their mother had died. Chioma kept her promise. She became one of the hardest workers in all of Umuogu. She fetched water for the old, she swept the shrines. She knelt before beggars and pressed kola nuts into their hands. And when she finally married, many years later, she married a man of modest means, and she danced at her sister's wedding the year before. And Adaeze danced at hers. Adaeze, with the gold the spirit had given her, built 3 schools in 3 villages. The gold lasted 30 years. By then she had had 4 children, and her words slowly returned to ordinary words, for the spirit blessing had done its work. And a blessing that lasts forever is not a blessing, it is a chain. And in Umuogu, when grandmothers tell their children stories under the moonlight, they always end the tale of Adaeze and Chioma with the same words. How you treat a stranger is how the world will treat you. Treat softly, child. Treat softly. The moon is watching.